But I think they view themselves as Stanley Cup contenders. And they can't, I'm saying this hyperbolically, but they can't be beat.
It's time now for the Nuff Said with Bob Koshinski podcast. Brought to you by Chef's Famous Italian Restaurant, home to spaghetti parm, and Rich Entertainment. They bring friends and family together through unforgettable experiences. And the Big Weck Radio, home to the oldies. Bob's guest on this episode is The Athletic's Tim Graham.
Welcome back to another edition of Nuff Said with yours truly. Want to give a shout out to the famous Chef's Italian Restaurant. We're here in the French Connection Room, adorned with Sabres photographs. I posted one the other day of Wayne Gretzky with Gilbert Perreault. It's a classic. Also, we want to give a shout out to the Big Weck and Buddy Shula, my favorite radio station, and of course, Rich Entertainment. We'll hear more from them in just a bit. And don't forget, Buffalo Bison's baseball coming up in a couple of weeks. President Mike Buczkowski will be joining us, so that should be cool. But today, we have one of the new voices on GR Radio in the afternoon from time to time, but he's an excellent writer for The Athletic, Tim Graham. Tim, it's always good to have you back.
Thanks for having me. That's not official. There's nothing at GR. I'm just kind of playing around with it.
I know. Well, if people were driving around, like, well, who's this voice? I don't recognize this voice, but I certainly did. You've been doing radio for quite a while.
Yeah, back on WNSA days, I was always in studio for this or that. I used to do a Saturday morning show with Brenda Alessi and Steve Manson for a little bit, and I always enjoyed it.
And you did WHLD for quite a while.
Yeah, 1270 The Fan, back when that existed, and then COVID knocked us non-full-timers off the air. We couldn't come into the studio, so that's when I took my radio show to the podcast.
COVID knocked a lot of part-time or full-timers off the air, too. So.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, Tim, so we're going to talk Sabres and we're going to talk Bills. And I'm so happy to say that the Sabres are relevant, that there's a reason to talk about the Sabres other than a GM firing watch. And I got to tell you, I feel bad for Kevin Adams. I mean, this guy, finally the pieces started to work, and he's on the outside looking in. But I guess that's pro sports.
I don't know if he has an agent, but if he does, that agent should be making all the phone calls. Now, of course, hockey works a little bit differently than the NFL. And you see it with different guys. They have a contract, they get fired, but they still belong to a team because the team is paying them. We had it with Tim Murray and different guys around the league. You have to go. But I'm sure that the Sabres would be more than happy to let Kevin Adams get out of his contract if that is the case, and start telling people like, "Hey, see what's going on in Buffalo? I built that roster." Now, if you know anything about the Sabres, I mean, around the league, there are people who'd be like, yeah, but why weren't they winning while you were there? And why did all of a sudden this big release happen? And I think really it comes down to the power of sports psychology. And these players who Kevin Adams all acquired and kept onto and built and molded this roster, I think they were just punching the time clock. They were coming in, they didn't have faith that if they were good enough, they were going to get any help at the trade deadline. You had players like even their captain, Kyle Okposo, who was being rewarded with being traded to a contender at the trade deadline over the years. All the guys who were like, well, you did your time. We're going to put you out on parole, and you can then go chase a Stanley Cup. I always thought it was counterintuitive, and it was a bit of a loser mentality that it was viewed among Sabres fans and obviously within the organization that, isn't it a nice thing to send our captain to another team? Now, of course, if you're totally out of it, I get it. But he was your captain. He's supposed to be changing your culture. It's not supposed to be the treadmill of malaise. And if he's the guy who you identified to be your captain, then why all of a sudden is it okay to have him? At the time, the Sabres were still pretending like they were in the hunt.
Right.
But then to send your captain off to the Florida Panthers to win a Stanley Cup, I always thought was a loser's mentality.
When you watch these games, and I have to say I had not had MSG on my cable service for some time. I really didn't see a reason to knock off the Comedy Channel to watch Sabres games. Well, I made my trip into Spectrum and did the switch, and I'm now watching the games, which my sister, who's a diehard fan, was happy to see. But There's plenty of examples, and we just saw one in the NFL, where teams go from worst to first. We saw it with the New England Patriots, but I can't remember a season where a team was in last place and then literally 2 months later they're one of the best, if not the best team currently in the league. And it's just amazing how they hit that switch. And they're such a formidable team now. I mean, we saw it against Tampa Bay. I mean, they beat them there. Tampa comes in here and obviously decided we're going to rough these guys up and see what they're made out of. And, Buffalo doesn't have many fighters, but at least the guys all stood up. They all mixed it up. They all yucked it up in the penalty box, which was a classic. And they just they fall behind. They're up 3-0. I mean, I'm not going to tell the whole story of the game, but you're down by 2 goals in the third period. You've lost all the juice, and they found a way to come back and win. Amazing.
St. Louis Blues a few years ago made that dramatic U-turn, but they weren't coming through 14 straight years of no postseasons. There was, this is the Marianas Trench of, slumps in all of sports. And for Lindy Ruff to be able to pull this off as the same coach too, it's been fun to watch in that regard, to see these guys finally get rewarded. And to the previous question about Kevin Adams, and this is where I think Jarmo Kekalainen maybe deserves more credit than Kevin Adams should be ridiculed for what he couldn't get done. But there's such a huge disparity in credibility between Kevin Adams and Jarmo Kekalainen, and we've seen it with these news conferences and the cool, calm demeanor. There's a gravitas with Jarmo Kekalainen that we didn't have with Kevin Adams, unfortunately. And the players see that, and the rest of the league sees that. And so they're respected more. The players come to work with this feeling of, we are going to be supportive. We do have an astute general manager who can see down the road and be proactive. And so that has manifested itself into what we're seeing here. And now the Sabres, the only team after the Olympic break not to have lost. But in that game against Tampa, and this is where I think the game is symbolic. Well, it's symbolic in a number of ways. You mentioned Tampa Bay coming in, trying to make a statement. They're going to test these guys. The Lightning wouldn't be doing that if they weren't concerned about the Sabres. If the Sabres were just a flash in the pan and they didn't have much respect for the Sabres, they wouldn't care. They were playing their backup goaltender. Let's just get through Buffalo. Let's get back home, whatever. But they didn't. They had a deliberate and very committed approach to the Sabres that they were going to bully these guys in their own building. And the Sabres didn't let it happen. During that game, as the Sabres get up by 3 goals, but then start trailing by 2 with everything that's happened, I'm thinking to myself as I'm watching the game, boy, look at all these lessons that the Sabres are going to learn. They're going to lose this game, because with 10 minutes left, they were down by 2, and they'd been caught from behind. It wasn't just they were down by 2. It was the way it had eroded.
Momentum had completely shifted.
Yeah, it was just like, well, it's they put up a valiant effort. They just couldn't finish it off. And that's what happens with young teams that need to learn how to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we're going to be talking on WGR tomorrow about valiant effort, lessons learned. These are the types of games that you need to figure out before, so you can adjust and approach the next time this happens. And then they win the game. And it reminded me of when you were watching the Josh Allen Bills. When Josh Allen went from that rookie that you weren't sure about to maybe the second year or whenever it was as a Bills fan, where you had that belief. Maybe it was even when Stephon Diggs got here. But there went from a time of the E.J. Manuel, Tyrod Taylor, Nathan Peterman Bills, and even into the first season or two of Josh Allen, they'd get to third down, and here comes the punter. They're not going to convert this third down. Well, then there came a point sometime, and we still, I think, experience it now. 3rd and 8, well, they're going to get it.
Right.
They're going to find a way to get it. And you're surprised when they don't. Whether maybe they might need the 4th down, but this team just doesn't come off the field, this offense. And I think that the performance that the Sabres delivered on Sunday against the Lightning is that base, that foundational piece that fans can look back now, and the team itself, and say, we're still going to win this game, or we're not out. Now, they might not actually do it, but that belief is starting to take hold.
Right. They're not going to fold their tents.
And that is so valuable. It's just you can't put a price on that.
Now, there was a phrase that we used to hear all the time when the Sabres were competitive and making the playoffs on a regular basis, and that is games in hand. Every time you talked about the race, but they have 2 games in hand. Tampa has 2 games in hand on Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo's up by 2 points, but Tampa's played 2 less games. How good are these Sabres? How far do you think they could go in the playoffs?
They're dangerous enough to make a run. And I think they believe it too, and the management sees it. They were getting Colton Parayko, and that move that they tried to make for Colton Parayko. He was playing for Canada in the Olympics just a couple of weeks ago, so he's a big piece, and he would not waive his no trade clause. Okay, so they were looking for big pieces. The Robert Thomas flirtation that was reported, big pieces. Now they end up with more. Maybe not foundational pieces, but spackling, as I would call it, right? It's just the guy who's going to fill this situation. You bring in Logan Stanley, who, all right, maybe those fights don't happen as prolifically or as there's not as many of them if Logan Stanley's around because he's a big fighter and a dangerous one, a feared one at that. Shen comes in as the guy that in case you have an injury in the playoffs. Sam Carrick comes in as the key face-off guy late in the game.
Yeah.
You're up by 1 with
he's contributed already.
With 90 seconds left, you're up by 1, and you have a defensive zone face-off that you must win. Now you have a face-off guy. So they are getting players that indicate that, at least from a management standpoint, I mean, the players, Alex Tuck has been talking about it, but they're talking about the Stanley Cup, and I think that is substantial too. But I think they view themselves as Stanley Cup contenders, and they can't. I'm saying this hyperbolically, but they can't be beat. So they can beat anybody on any given night, and so that's what you have going into the playoffs. If you have that mentality, and you might start with home ice advantage in the first round, then I think that it'd be a disappointment now if they don't win a round, but. They're still learning. They don't have that, So I don't know. I put that pressure on them, and they shouldn't have that pressure on them. But I think they're good enough to win a round or two, and then see what happens. I
know the 2 guys I got from Winnipeg are waiting on their visas. I had never heard of that.
I have heard of that. Now this has to go back 20 years when I was covering the Sabres. I have heard of that, but it's an interesting thing, and I don't have the answer to it. I wish I did, and I probably should. But the NHL is based in New York City. All the paperwork that you have, whether you play for Winnipeg, Vancouver, or Utah, you still have to cross the border so many times. Your visa should allow you. So I don't know if it's got to be not necessarily a work visa, but to have residence if they're going to live here. But why would that stop you from playing?
I don't know.
Put them up in a hotel in Fort Erie and have them come over because they're here. They're present in the United States.
I mean, the guy's up in the broadcast booth, and I'm sitting there wondering, because you said there's fights all over the ice. The guy's a monster, right? 6'7".
230.
He looks
at least.
He looks like he wants to get out there and do some damage to somebody.
How about this on the broadcast, though? I don't know if you caught it. I mean, the guy is he was. Rob Ray even made the comment, like, do you get excited about it? There are fights happening, and he's just kind of really monotone and just staring at the ice.
He looked like Lurch.
Yes, he did. He just didn't have it. Couldn't. And he's like, do you get excited about anything? And his answer is, yeah, I'm excited.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple, bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together. And honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
All right, we're going to switch gears to the Buffalo Bills. Okay, so they've made a couple moves. They pick up a cornerback from Atlanta, and they sign a backup quarterback, and they lose Trubisky, and they lose Edwards, and But they do sign McGovern. And so what's your take on, did you expect a flurry of moves by Bean during this?
No, because they're so far over the salary cap projected now, but they must be compliant by tomorrow afternoon. We're doing this on Tuesday, so by Wednesday afternoon, the start of the league year, they must be compliant. So to be in, and the first moves that happen in this first phase, they call it the legal tampering phase, which is an oxymoron. So I just say the first phase of free agency are the big guys. You know, they're the ones that are getting the big deals. They've already been worked out. These are coveted people. And so the Bills are working more with the second-tier free agent. And I'm not saying that in terms of a knock on them as players or the quality of play. Well, I guess it kind of is because your money, reflects your quality. But these are the guys that Brandon Bean is in play for mostly. Now, maybe they have a guy that they go for. Oh, what kind of
sloppy on my part.
What kind of professionalism is this?
I know, exactly. I'll just edit that out.
You better not. Hey, I think that the DJ Moore trade is their big acquisition, and of course Connor McGovern is huge, and Connor McGovern himself thought he was gone.
Right.
So
you were involved in that.
Coincidentally.
I heard you on the radio. Journalism was involved. No,
it was journalism.
You reported that he was kind of nervous because they hadn't spoken to him.
Well, I'd reached out to him last week, and he told me that neither he nor his agent had heard from the Bills since his exit interview, and that he thought. And I said, and he said, in my gut, it's over and done in Buffalo, and he was disappointed in that. And the next day after the story came out, the Bills reached out to him, and I had a couple of sources tell me that the Bills were embarrassed a little, maybe not ashamed, but they saw his comments and thought, they were upset that he felt bad, in an empathetic way, like, oh, damn, we don't want Connor to feel like we're taking him for granted. And then plus there were other comments in the story in which he said, I have a number in my mind that I will take and not hit free agency, because I've covered sports long enough. And I even asked him the question, well, you've gone this long. Free agency now begins in 5 or 6 days or whatever it was at the time we spoke. Are you now intent that you're going to be a free agent? Because now you might as well see what everybody's going to offer. And he was like, no. If my wife and I have a number, and we don't, the money's, to him, he said it was all about respect. And when you say that, obviously it has to do with the union. Well, the union wants their respect too, because he has NFL brothers that he can't just take the minimum. They're not going to allow that. And so he says it's about respect, and we have a number in our mind. And the Bills obviously called him up, saw that, called him up, and hit his number. And then Tyler Linderbaum of the Ravens signs. He was the best center in the offseason in this year's free agent class. Signs for 3 years, $81 million, $60 million in guarantees, whereas McGovern was 4 years, $52 with 20-something in guarantees. So Linderbaum's guarantees on one last year are more than McGovern's entire contract. And so I texted him. I said, do you wish you hadn't answered the phone when I called you last week? And he said he was happy with his deal. He's happy to be with the Bills.
Well, he didn't want to leave that great pizza oven behind that he's been
That's true, too.
Cooking an unbelievable amount of pizzas for his teammates. Okay, so Joe Brady. Now, my take on this, and I get the Joe Brady hire. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Josh Allen's happy. The offense was good. You're keeping the offense. You were concerned about the defense, and Sean McDermott certainly rarely lived up to his moniker as a defensive genius. Just didn't happen for whatever reason. But I'm watching the video of Joe Brady taking a tour of the new stadium. And it's just, to me, of course, because I'm such an old man, he's a kid. He's this young, energetic, almost collegiate type guy, right?
He's only 6 or 7 years older than the starting quarterback.
Yeah. And he's looking around. He's like, wow. And so they bring in Fox, who's like been a head coach. And I get the strategy. I don't think you should have to prop up your head coach with older guys to kind of take him through the forest. So we'll see how this plays off. But I think the move, it renews excitement from the players when they show up for camp, because I get it. Sean McDermott, and people have said he grinds on people. You're showing up, you're hearing the same mantra, you're hearing the same speeches in the locker room, and it's like, and yet, you're coming off another heartbreaking loss. Now you got a new guy who's going to be like, guys, now we'll figure it out, right? I mean, I can see the mental approach is different.
That's the hope, is that there's a spark. Now, how does he handle talking to a room full of dudes? Now, he's been doing it in smaller rooms. He's got half the team as the offensive coordinator, or a few guys, but the most important guys, while coaching the quarterbacks. And so I don't doubt that he's going to be able to project and be charismatic. But what happens how does he handle a Keon Coleman situation? I don't mean just what's happened. That's how things have unraveled with Keon Coleman, but the guy who doesn't show up to practice on time one day, or the guy who's got the weed suspension, or the guy who gets pulled over 5 times for speeding. I'm just pulling out, I'm thinking of different players.
Right.
There's different things that you have to manage. Travel situations, weather-related things. Now, you're not going to have them as much like you did with the old stadium, but when your guys can't practice, logistics, how you deal with there's a fight in practice, or there's a fight in the locker room, or 2 guys aren't getting along. All the different executive things that you must do. Now, the Bills said that they're happy with the CEO elements of his, and they told everybody in the national media that he was a home run in the interview when it came to being a CEO. But he's also not delegating the play calling authority, which you normally would get. That's not very CEO-like. He jokes in different videos I've seen, in-house videos, about how he goes into the cafeteria barefoot and gets, people are wondering, like, hey, we don't want to eat with your bare feet walking around here. And he's like, I know I'm going to have to start wearing shoes in the cafeteria. But then I made the reference one time, hey, Jimmy Buffett was a successful CEO too. So there's all different kinds. But he doesn't project as a CEO type to me.
No, he doesn't.
But it's about how the players respond. That's most important, and how. And I think probably Josh Allen, and the players are going to follow Josh Allen's lead. Now, Josh Allen's all in on Joe Brady. This is just one small thing. A friend brought this up to me. I hadn't noticed it. And he says, did you ever notice how Josh Allen always called the previous coach McDermott, and this guy's Joe? And I know that that's a minor thing, but they're closer in age. They're buddies. It was a thing that Ryan Fitzpatrick, on his podcast before the Bills hired Joe Brady, said that the Bills have to avoid is hiring Josh Allen's buddy. They can't. Everybody's going to want to go golfing with Josh. Everybody's going to want to sidle up to Josh. Everybody's going to want to please Josh. And the Bills have to avoid that. They need somebody who's going to push Josh, demand more from Josh, that Josh actually has another gear that he could hit. And then what happened in that introductory news conference? It was a love affair for Josh.
Yeah.
The quote was, everything I do is going to be to help you win a Super Bowl, Josh. And I think that's been a strange dynamic in the Bills this offseason. They keep playing that Josh Allen card, matter what. He's the answer to every question, both positive and negative. How about free agency, Brandon? Well, that Josh Allen contract. Josh is the answer for this. Well, Josh Allen. Well, of course, Josh Allen. And it's like, and I get it, and it's true to an extent, but at some point, is it almost like an excuse or a crutch?
I've talked about this before. I don't know Josh Allen. I only know what the fan knows about Josh Allen. Heard, some things. Great guy. He had a universe of pressure on him before. Now he is involved in the interviews. His guy gets hired. I assume it was his guy, although sources have told me that people close to him thought it was going to be Kubiak from Seattle, and that if it was because his run extended with Seattle and they didn't want to lose their guy, whatever. But to me, it's like Josh Allen has to totally understand that the weight of the entire, not just organization, but the community, firmly sits more on his shoulders now than it even did a year ago.
You're out of people to blame.
Yeah.
Unless you want to blame Brandon Beane. Because Joe Brady has Josh Allen's fingerprints on it, right? Josh Allen is being held up, and the Bills are doing it. No, I'm not saying it's concerted.
Do you know of another case of
relations.
where the quarterback was in on the job interviews for the next coach?
It has happened. I'd have to go back and I think maybe even Lamar Jackson was, but then Steve Bisciotti made it a point like, we may listen, but we're not. He's got nothing to do. It was kind of like he kicked it aside. Whereas the Bills have been very careful to delicately talk about Josh Allen's involvement, and they're not putting him on the hook. But Jonah Bronstein, I know, has been on your show, and he's the co-host of my podcast.
Great guy.
Unbelievable. He made a great point. He says Josh Allen may not have picked Joe Brady as the coach, but your tendency is we're going to guess the guy Josh Allen wants the most and make him happy, or we want Josh Allen to be happy, and that's something that they've been doing since Davis Webb was the third string quarterback. They wanted to keep Davis Webb around so much that while he was an active player, they offered him their quarterback job when Brian Dable left and took Shea Tierney with him. So they're like, hey, Davis, do you want to? And so Davis Webb's like, no, I want to keep playing as long as I can. It's good for, better money, good for the pension, all these things. And maybe I get to play, actually. I'll be a coach some other time. So he ended up signing with the Giants, I think it was. But anyway, Davis Webb, and sure enough, he's climbed the ranks, and his status grows every year as a future coach in the NFL. But anyway, the Bills have been trying to keep Josh Allen happy for years. And Kyle Allen comes back as the backup quarterback yesterday. So that's one of Josh Allen's buddies. But Jonah's point was, Josh Allen may not have said, I want Joe Brady, but they know he wants Joe Brady. Therefore, he's the quarterback. He's the head coach.
During the combine, I saw some interviews that Brandon Beane and Joe Brady did. They hit the circuit. I mean, they did every podcast possible. And Brandon Beane was very careful when asked about the firing of Sean McDermott, that it was Pagula's call. I don't know what else is he going to say. He's not going to take ownership of it. But I knew firsthand that those two came in as good friends, and at some point had a falling out. And I guess it's going to happen if you both report to the same guy and things just aren't getting done. At some point, somebody's going to start pointing a finger.
Yes, and I'm not saying that Brandon Beane fired Sean McDermott either, because Terry Pagula would have to be the one to do that based on how their contracts were set up. So, of course, he's accurate in saying Terry Pagula fired Sean McDermott. The thing that doesn't line up for me is how Brandon Beane said he didn't know about it until that Monday morning. It happened on a Monday. And by 10 or 10:30 that morning, he had a promotion. He and Pete Gwelly had both been promoted to president within the organization. Now, those contracts don't just materialize. You don't, all the different protocols that you have to go through with the NFL to have a president's role. You have to go through extra screening, and you get extra access to things within the NFL's largesse when you're a president. And so that's what's hard to fathom. It's just like Doug Whaley not being privy, to Rex Ryan being fired. I'm sure that Brandon Beane was privy, but they wanted to get Brandon Beane as far away from that as possible. Terry Pagula wanted to take ownership, and that whole news conference when they announced Sean being fired was, we're going to get Brandon off the hook for any of it. And it went so far as to, he didn't even draft Keon Coleman. They were leaning so far into all the great things
didn't work out
Brandon Beane did and all the things Sean McDermott couldn't accomplish, even though their failures and their successes are identical.
Tim, I've been on the PR side of organizations. You never tell the truth. It's just, that's the PR guy's job, and organizations. Everybody says, we want total transparency. There's never total transparency because for good reason. Things would get too ugly. People would never be able to work with each other if everybody knew what went on behind closed doors. Tim, it's always great to have you on.
It's always great to be on.
I hope that we continue to hear you on WGR at some point.
I have no idea if that'll happen.
Well,
I don't even know if it can happen, quite frankly. I work
Maybe
for
I'll
the
start
Athletic.
a write-in campaign.
Oh, okay. Do people still do that?
No, they don't.
Letters?
What?
Are
We
you
got to
gonna
buy a stamp?
Dip your feather in ink and scrawl it out? I would like that.
No, you do
that.
a great job. And
Thank
it's
you.
always good to have you. And, of course, you're an excellent writer. And I keep saying at some point, I don't know when, but we got to have you back. I want to talk boxing with you.
Yeah.
I want to talk boxing, and we can talk about the sport.
It can only go up to about a certain year because I stopped watching.
I know. Well, there's plenty to be talked about. But anyway, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Bob.
Before we say total goodbye, we want to hear these words from our good friends at Rich Entertainment.
At Rich Entertainment Group, their mission is simple: bringing friends and families together through unforgettable experiences. From live sports and theater productions to luxury travel and hospitality, they're creating moments that people truly remember. With 19 businesses and growing, Rich Entertainment Group isn't just a group of companies. It's a community built around connection, joy, and shared experiences. It's all about bringing people together. And honestly, that's something we can all use a little more of.
And Rich Entertainment, we want to thank them for the support and give a shout out to the Buffalo Bisons. And of course, we want to thank again Tim Graham. And Tim, are you working on any hot stories on the Athletic? Anything you can tip us to?
I'm working on a potentially hot story that may be nothing, which happens a lot.
Yeah,
I have one that I'm researching, and it starts off with an ember that is just red and smoldering, and the more I learn, the more it keeps dimming. So it's not as hot as I thought it was, but it happens sometimes.
Tim Graham, it's great to have him on. We want to thank, of course, Lou Billatier and Mary Beth Billatier, Chef's Restaurant. And if you get a chance, Tim, look around the room at some of these photos. Sometimes I ignore the fact that I'm surrounded by history here.
No, I do every time I come in
Yeah.
here. And they hit home a little bit more because with what's happening with the Sabres right now, the last couple times I've been in here, you see these and you think, oh, wouldn't it be great if...
Yeah.
Couldn't we
relive
get back
these
to
days? Yeah.
And here now I'm looking at it and it's like, good times.
Louis pointed out to me he's got Gilbert Perreault's rookie gloves and skates in here. Yeah, which I found him, on the wall. So, Okay, thank you to Chefs, and thank you, of course, to the Big Weck and Buddy Schuling Company, and our good friends at Rich Entertainment. Mike Bichkowski coming up in a couple of weeks. Next week on St. Patrick's Day, Paul Peck will be with us. We'll be talking about college basketball and March Madness. Until then, Bob Koshinski saying have yourself a good night and a much better tomorrow.